Okay, so I wanted to get started asking you all about what really inspired you to become musicians and what that experience was like, maybe growing up and being interested in playing music and just kind of like your journeys to become musicians overall.
You can go, Kate, if you want. I'll go after you.
Yeah, I actually didn't become a musician until later in life. So um, I grew up around a lot of musicians on my dad's side of the family. Everyone's like a bass player, my uncle and my aunt, and grew up, yeah, around a very musical family, but didn't really do it for myself. Like took piano lessons, and played clarinet in middle school, but wasn't really like a passion of mine. Although I always wrote poetry, I always was like writing as a kid. And it really wasn't until I traveled to Brazil, and I was like alone for the first time, and I was learning a new language, and I was teaching English abroad, that it was kind of like it opened me up to that form of expression of kind of like playing with my voice in another language. And so I started singing and playing music, yeah, like in my early 20s. So a little bit of a different journey than Maddie and Lydia, who've been playing for a long time.
Yeah, Lydia and I are twins, and our parents were both pretty musical. They both played the piano, so they got us into piano lessons as like 5-year-olds. And um and our older sister also was always really musical. So we kind of had a family band as little kids, and we're just always really encouraged to try new things and make up songs. And so Lydia and I had our first band probably when we were like 7 or 8, and then we had a band all through like middle school and high school, and eventually kind of did a duo project, just the two of us. And then when we both went to college, kind of split from each other and kept playing music with other people, and eventually found our way back into a band together in Austin. But I think we just I guess we had a lot of opportunity as kids, and a lot of privilege of having parents that just let us dive into our interests and really encouraged us to play music. So we've both been playing like drums and bass since we were like 8, 9. Mm-hmm.
And Lydia, I also wanted to ask you about your experiences in playing music and what that experience was like for you as well, and deciding to pursue music professionally as well.
Yeah. Well, as Maddie mentioned, we had this band forever. And then when I was around 18, I got interested in West African drumming. And that eventually brought me to Senegal to study percussion. And that just became like a huge part of my life, kind of like going back and forth and studying this drum called the talking drum. And I like your question about like deciding to pursue music professionally, because I think there was a time, especially in college, where I was like, oh, it's silly to like try and be a musician. It's like a 1 in a million chance that you can like make it as a musician. But when we started touring as a band, like we've up until a year ago, we're self-managed completely, booked our own tours and booked our own shows. And when we started doing that, I was like, oh, I know how to do this. I've been doing this since I was like 10 years old. Like we've been booking shows and playing festivals. And so it kind of all came full circle. And I was like, actually, like a lot of music is really about like business and working as a team and all of these things that I've been like practicing along with music my whole life. And so it really felt possible to like make a career as a musician once I realized that it's like not just about having a viral YouTube video or whatever it is.
And also, I wanted to ask you all about forming the band together as well, and what that experience was like of really deciding to work together and form this group, and what that experience like overall was like putting the group together.
I think there's like a lot of synchronicity. I really love your questions also. They're very different from like other questions we've received. There was a lot of synchronicity that happened that brought us together. Like even meeting each other was this kind of like random experience where I was staying on the front lawn of a friend's house, Kate and Emily were staying at that house, and we sang together, and we could like instantly harmonize when all four of us got together, and it just felt right, you know. So kind of coming back together and making music has always felt like it just flowed, and it was like the path of least resistance to be doing it as a group. That's how I feel.
Yeah, and then Maddie, so like we we met in 2013, and then everyone kind of like went off and did their own stuff, and then we didn't really come back together again until 2015. And that's when Maddie had moved down with another music project. And so she was kind of in that realm, and we were all kind of like playing at yoga classes and farmers markets, and it was just something to kind of like, I don't know, it wasn't really like, oh yeah, let's like be a band. At first it felt more like, let's just play music because this is really fun, and we're going to sit in the sun for a while, and we get free yoga classes, and let's see what happens. And then that slowly turned into like getting some recording time with a really dear friend of mine, who became all of our friends, the late great Seth Gibbs. And that's kind of like the band formed in his studio, and I think it was through that like space of like somebody being like, cool, what else do you have? Like, let's listen, let's hear it. Because we're all four songwriters. I think that's something that's really interesting, excuse me. Because we all, and you can hear that on our first album of kind of like everyone's style and songwriting. And actually we had begun that process before Lydia moved down to Austin. So it wasn't really until like it was done and Lydia's percussion and some of her harmonies made it on that we're like, okay, cool, it's done. So we all are in it together. Let's see what happens. And I think it was like 2016, our first tour was really like the trial of like, okay, cool. We knew we wanted it to be like kind of more relaxed, not really like, let's make it like an all touring experience. We knew we wanted to explore nature. We wanted to visit friends. We wanted to like have a good time, not really like this pedal to the metal, go, 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 make as much money as possible. Although we did well, but that wasn't like the focus. And because I remember everybody was like, cool, what's next? Like after this tour, like maybe we're all going to move away again, and maybe Ley Line won't be a thing, and like we'll see what happens. But it was like once that first tour happened, it was like, this feels really good and this is really cool, and where else could we go? What else could we do?
And we liked traveling together. I think that was huge. It's like it was easy and fun, and we could kind of, you know, traveling with anyone is like a big learning experience, and it's like relationship ups and downs, but we have always been able to like move through that. Especially when we're traveling, we have like this really strong sense of connection and like really clear communication. So that's just became like, we're like, well, we know we want to travel together, and music is something that like allows us to be able to do that also.
And also, speaking about recording and writing music together, I also wanted to ask about that experience for your record, your new record in particular, and what that process was like of really creating the songs for the album overall as well.
Yeah, so our newest album, we traveled down to Brazil in 2017 and did a self-managed tour, from like a southern point to a more like northern coastal point, 3,000 miles. And along that trip, we filmed the whole time, and we did some collaborating with people, and we just each like writing poetry. So when we came back, as we processed this voyage that we'd all taken together, we began making the songs that went on that album. So a lot of them are either songs that we were playing a lot during that tour, or songs that are reflections of that time, stories that we picked up along the way. And someone else want to jump in? I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, I think we wanted to, because Field Notes, our first album, was so distinct of the different voices and who is bringing the song and who's leading it. We really wanted to like, it was like the first album was like, cool, we're all getting to know each other. And the second album was like, how can we even more be like intentional with making sure we're balancing and weaving in and like uplifting everyone's individual voice, whether that's an instrument or an actual voice, or just a vision for where the song's going. So it was like, it was really created with a lot of care, and it took a really long time, right? Like it was about 3 years in the making. And so there was like a lot of different moments where we were like, do we start over? Do we keep going? Because we are new and kind of like figuring out how we wanted to create this sound, and what types of spaces. So we recorded it in a couple different places. We recorded out at Good Danny's in Lockhart. We recorded at a church here in Austin. We recorded
at the recording
at the
conservatory,
recording conservatory,
in our bedrooms,
in bedrooms, in so many different places. And I think that that's like one of my favorite things about the album, is that you have this sense of like all these different spaces and times and travel within the music and within the album. There was a really inspirational album for me by Ila Bamba, where you can hear her really embracing kind of like her inspiration and her song styles, and you go on this journey, but you're with her the whole time. And so really taking that as an inspiration for how we want people to feel in our music, of like Tout ce que je vois has a very, very different feel than To the Sky, but there's still those threads of French and ukulele, but they're in completely different styles, but somehow they all kind of seem to weave together. So that's kind of how we were approaching this last album.
And also, I wanted to ask about creating the visual album to go along with the record, and what that experience was like for you all, and really creating both like the songs as well as the visual album to go along with it as well.
Yeah, it's
was
been
like
such a journey.
Yeah, like a pretty similar process of having all of these ideas, and then just the amount of time it takes to test things out and eventually really solidify the vision. So it went along with creating the album, because it was a pretty long process of nailing down these songs and what we wanted them to sound like. And then mostly over the last year since COVID, we really had the time to focus on the visual album, and we finally completed the album. So we had that in our heads to use. And the visual album is the first 5 songs on the album We Saw Blue. It's the A-sides of our vinyl. And those are mostly the songs that like really came out of the time in Brazil. So as we're using, like selecting footage from while we were filming down in Brazil, we really wanted to tell the story of kind of this behind the scenes of our traveling and our connection to each other and to nature, because that's something that is alive in all of our music, this like spiritual connection to nature. So the visual album is kind of has a documentary feel in some ways, and it's kind of like mini music videos. And
It really feels like traveling, like when you're watching it, it feels like you get to come along the journey with us, and I think that's really special. And it was also just like, I think that was one of the like silver linings of COVID, because we were super busy before COVID, and we were trying to find an editor who could like bring our vision to life. And we tried like about 3 different editors, and we would get things back, and it was like, but that's not really quite it. And we can like see it. Like, I think we couldn't even quite explain it to each other, but we could all like feel it and see it as a collective. And so Maddie learned video editing. She's been doing it for years, but she really she had to switch programs so that she could be like up to date, and she learned how to do it. And we like sat side by side and edited the whole thing, the 4 of us pretty much.
And also, I wanted to ask about creating your podcast as well, and what that experience was like of having the podcast accompany the visual record and the album overall, and that experience of recording the podcast as well.
Yeah, the podcast has been like a dream for a long time of mine personally, because we always have these like amazing car conversations. I'm like, I feel like people would want to hear this. Like we've got all these backstories to our songs, or the different like cultures where our music comes from. We all have like a lot of knowledge about these different places and cultures and musical traditions, and we could talk forever about it. And I'm like, I really feel like we should record this so people could hear more about what inspires our music. So we started doing that just for our patrons on Patreon back in February during our last tour. Like, had no idea that any of this was going to happen. And the third and fourth episodes were like right at the start of quarantine, when we weren't even like seeing each other in person, and we were trying to figure out like, how do we stay connected? So the podcast became a way that we could like continue talking to each other and be working towards something, but we could be physically separate. So that's felt like a special way for us to like stay connected and stay connected to the music. And it feels really sweet to be able to like share this moment in time and these conversations with people now that we're kind of getting to, hopefully, the tail end of COVID. It's like kind of like looking back in time at like what we've all collectively been through in the last year.
Also, I wanted to ask you all about getting to play during South by Southwest and having the virtual showcase and what that experience was like as well.
It was awesome. I mean, it was different because we only played 2 songs, so and it was our only showcase. We did play an in-person, a live event at the University of Texas right before the show, so that was awesome to be able to like play for people in like live real time. But for the South by official showcase, it was great to be kind of like in the audience and performing at the same time, to kind of like be watching yourself, because it was a pre-recorded show. So we were able to be in the chat with the audience and seeing people's comments and questions, and being able to connect with them right then and there. And was really different, because usually it's kind of like you play, you don't really know who you played for, maybe they'll come up and talk to you afterwards, but this was like a direct connection. So I definitely prefer the in-person real time kind of live thing, but it was awesome to not have to find parking and not have to lug our instruments around and kind of navigate the chaos of South by as it's been in the past couple years. So definitely can't wait till it comes back to, I'm not going to say the way it used to be, because I feel like there's definitely room for improvement of like representation for more independent artists, and just kind of less of a corporate focus and more on the music. So I'm excited to see how South by in this interim time gets to reimagine what the festival will be like, and maybe it'll be like a hybrid where some of it's virtual, so it does allow people from all over the world to join without having to buy a plane ticket to come in, and hopefully there'll be some live in-person events too.
And also, I wanted to ask about having the opportunity to play during the Black Fret Showcase in particular, and your collaboration in that respect, and what that experience was like as well overall.
You said specifically the Black Fret Showcase?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was so fun to watch it, I think, because it was awesome going and filming it, and like we love everyone in that community, and it really shines a light on just how uplifted the music community is in Austin, and it's organizations like Black Fret that are like really doing that work and bringing people together around music, and just feeling how special the musical community is, because watching it I was like, oh, these are all my friends playing, and just feeling so excited and like encouraging everyone is like sending messages the whole time. And yeah, it's a really strong music community in Austin, and it feels good to do things like that when you just get to celebrate everyone else.
And now, after playing during South by, what's maybe coming up next? Besides promoting the new album, are you looking forward to having like more in-person shows when you're allowed to go back and do like those in-person performances, and just in general, maybe what's coming up next for you overall?
Yeah.
We
Well,
like,
oh, sorry.
go ahead. No, you can go.
Well, the visual album is coming out May 14th, and we're really hoping to do like a hybrid virtual and in-person film screening and live performance and question and answer. So that's in the works for like around that time, May 14th. And then we have some tours planned for the summer. We're going to be in Colorado in the end of May and the Midwest in the end of June. And I think touring is going to be a little different. We're going to have some shows in concert halls and kind of like limited capacity shows, but we're also going to be offering house concerts, like outdoor, kind of just like community based concerts. And we're really excited to just like play for people in person, whatever that looks like, and just like get creative, because it's we've always really loved those like intimate shows. So I'm actually kind of excited for this like post-COVID chapter where it's going to be a lot more DIY and just about bringing music to people and less about like ticket sales and promotion and all the other things that go along with touring, you know.
Yeah. Okay, I think that was mainly it, but thank you all again for taking the time out today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
Mhm.